Whenever you think about naval warfare in World War II, if you're like me, your mind probably automatically goes to things like the big aircraft carriers, or the battleships, or the destroyers, or the cruisers. Whenever you think of naval warfare, the last thing that is going to come to mind is probably a tugboat. Well, today I am in Little Rock, Arkansas, and as you can see, I'm crossing this old historic bridge that was built in the 1800s over the Arkansas River, and we are going to the Arkansas Inland Maritime Museum to look at a very important naval craft that played a huge role in the attack on Pearl Harbor. Oh, look at how sweet this is. Some love-struck couple placed a lock here on the bridge and then sealed it with a rose. Guarantee you they broke up within a week. Huh. Apparently Teddy Roosevelt was here as well. Interesting. If you are at all familiar with the story of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, well then you likely know names like the USS Arizona, which still lays at the bottom of Pearl Harbor today. And you might also know names like the USS Nevada, or the Oklahoma, or the Tennessee. The one name that you probably don't know or aren't as familiar with is the USS Hoga. So this is a tugboat that was launched on December 31st of 1940. It was commissioned in May of 1941 and was sent to Pearl Harbor. And on December 7th, as the Japanese were attacking the US fleet at Pearl Harbor, this ship right here was going to find itself right in the middle of the action. Now, if you were like me, you probably don't know just a whole lot about naval tugboats from World War II. Just in short, the length of this craft would have been 100 feet long. The beam would have been 25 feet and would have displaced about 325 tons. A tugboat, this is obviously a very small vessel, so you're looking at a crew of 10. Now, even though there were hundreds of these that were produced during World War II, there aren't many left. This is probably the most well-preserved, largely unaltered example of one of these tugboats. And of course, as I've already mentioned a few times, the significance of this one is that it was present during the attack on Pearl Harbor. If I'm not mistaken, it might be the last surviving naval vessel that was in Pearl Harbor during the Japanese attack. But we're going to go inside and kind of pick apart how a naval tugboat would have worked, and the different rooms and compartments. And then there's a really awesome story that I want to tell associated with this particular vessel. All right, well, I am currently boarding the USS Hoga, and I'm standing on the main deck right now. And as I've mentioned a few times already, the Hoga is a tugboat, so one of the things that this vessel would do is what you would expect a tugboat to do. It would pull larger vessels through canals and through constricted areas. What you may not know is that this vessel was also equipped with several water cannons, or several, I think there were 3. So right here is where one of the main water cannons would have been, that would have been used for firefighting duties, which is going to be very important during the attack on Pearl Harbor. They also had life rafts on here, so they would have responsibilities picking up sailors who had gone overboard. Just a lot of different things that you might not expect a towboat to be carrying out. You may have heard the phrase that a rolling stone gathers no moss. Not sure if that applies to turtles as well or not. That one looks a little fuzzy. All right, moving into the deck house of the Hoga here. This first room that we're moving into on the back end of the ship is the crew's mess and galley. So again, we're looking at a crew of 10, so you don't need a huge facility. This is where the food would have been prepared. And then of course the crew would have sat around that table there to eat. So you got a little oven there. And yeah, all kinds of stuff here to feed the crew. All right, and then here we have the officer's water closet. So there would have been 2 officers on board here, and this would have been their shower and toilet facilities. Now we can't go below deck because there are some restoration efforts that are going on, so you can't go to the engine room or anything like that, but we can go up to the pilot house. All right, moving up here into the pilot house. Yeah, this is kind of cool. So this is the area where the helm would have been, right here. Also, you would have had communication equipment up here in this part, navigation. So yeah, this is kind of the brains of the Hoga. Hey, looky there. Somebody here at the Inland Maritime Museum must have watched my video on the Minesweeper. Coming up off of the main deck, trying not to bump my head, and oh, son of a gun. Here's a look at the pilot house from the outside, and then if you look up top, well, you can see one of the primary water cannons that would have been mounted here on this tugboat. And of course it makes sense that it would be atop the pilot house in the highest position. That's going to offer you the greatest field of view. And if you're having to put out fires on larger ships like a battleship or a carrier or something like that, well, you want as much elevation as possible. And then here to the rear of the pilot house is yet another water cannon. I think I may have mentioned before, I think there were 3 on the Hoga. So again, here's the pilot house on the other side. Here is the exhaust stack for the Hoga, and if I'm not mistaken, right behind the pilot house, this is where the lifeboat would have been for the crew. So obviously, you know, if this vessel starts to sink, well, you don't want your lifeboat in the lowest part of the ship that's going down first. You want it up high to where it's one of the last things that's going to go down, so that the crew can get it and save themselves. Now, as I've already alluded to me, the most compelling story about the Hoga is its performance on the day that Pearl Harbor was attacked. So within 10 minutes of the first wave of Japanese attacks at Pearl Harbor, the Hoga was underway, and throughout all of December 7th, this little ship was going to be all over the place. So it started off rescuing sailors who had gone overboard. There was a ship called the USS Vestal that was moored to the USS Arizona. Obviously the Arizona was in bad shape, and there was a risk that the Vestal could also catch fire. So the Hoga went and helped pull the Vestal away from the Arizona. The USS Nevada got hit by a torpedo in the first wave, but was still seaworthy. So they were making out for open water, were trying to get out of Pearl Harbor. Well, about the time they got to the exit of Pearl Harbor, well, that's whenever the second wave came. So the Japanese saw an opportunity where if they could sink the Nevada right there at the opening of Pearl Harbor, they could block traffic going in and out. So a lot of fire was concentrated on the Nevada. It started to go down. Well, in comes the Hoga, and literally got up against the Nevada and pushed it out of the way in order to keep Pearl Harbor open. And there's a really interesting mark here on this ship associated with the actions between the Hoga and the Nevada. Now, if you look on the starboard side here on the Hoga, now I gotta be careful not to put myself overboard, you may notice that right in here, there's a little bit of a dent on the side. Well, that dent was made whenever the Hoga pushed up against the Nevada to clear it out of the lane there, or out of the channel going into Pearl Harbor. So interesting to see that mark. Huh. Well, that is a little bit on the USS Hoga, a ship that you've probably never heard of in regards to its actions on December 7th, 1941. And you can come and see it right here at the Arkansas Inland Maritime Museum. So again, as I said in the beginning, we hear about the cruisers and the battleships and the aircraft carriers, but the service that the men performed on ships like this was just as valuable as any other. So anyway, yeah, you can come here and see it for yourself. Now, that's not all that you can see. They also have a World War II era submarine called the Razorback, and we have some pretty cool opportunities to do some things here on the Razorback that you don't get to experience every day, but that will be in the next episode.